So welcome everybody. My name is Aurora Dizell. I'm with the Darby Creek Valley Association, and we are really excited tonight to be hosting the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. We have Dana and Barley here from PHS, and they're going to be talking to us about tree care and also their additional programs they have about tree tenders. So welcome and thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Aurora. Thanks for having us. Barley and I are very happy to be here to speak with the group and just share with you what our PHS Trees programs are all about and some tree care 101. And we hope that many of you will join us on the 17th for the actual hands-on workshop that we're doing at Haverford Creek. But feel free, like if you have any questions that come up and just want to put them in the chat box, Barley and Aurora will monitor those. And if we don't get to them during the talk, we could get to them after. Yeah, I expect probably maybe go close to 7, and we're happy to stay on after 7 if there's a lot more questions. All right, so let's jump into it. So just a quick little commercial PHS, you know, we're the country's oldest horticultural organization, been around since 1827. So we're getting close to our 200-year anniversary, birthday, which is really exciting. And in preparation for reaching our 200 year, we've done some strategic planning to look at current issues facing this region and how we might use horticulture and our expertise as a tool to address some of those changes. So these are our 4 key impact areas that we're looking to focus on our work on. Again, we want to build strong relationships between community residents through the programming that we can offer, and really focus on creating more healthy, sustainable living environments for everyone. Everyone has the right to those. Increasing access to fresh food. We have really awesome gardening programs, and then also expanding economic opportunities. So we're delivering that impact various ways, partnering with various community-based, neighborhood-based organizations, with our greening initiatives and education programs, providing public gardens, landscapes to everyone, trying to engage environmentalists and gardeners and tree enthusiasts to be advocates for change in their own neighborhoods. And as many of you know, our Philadelphia Flower Show. So Barley and I, we are part of the neighborhoods team at PHS. And this is we are like a community of partners, PHS staff, and then all of the different community organizations we're working with on various programs, from our vacant land care, cleaning and greening, stabilizing lots in Philadelphia. Many of you probably know or are familiar with our flagship Tree Tenders program, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And our gardens and residential stormwater programming through rain barrels and stormwater planters, rain gardens. And we also have workforce development programs. So diving deeper into a little bit about PHS tree programs, what my team specifically is working on at PHS. Tree tenders, trainings, or educational programs, as well as planting and stewardship programs makes up kind of the core of what we do. But we also have our TreeVitalize Watershed grant program, which DCVA has been an awardee of, and we'll be planting this fall, one of their projects. And then we do other special projects as we get grants, and we, again, try and focus on areas of high need and priority, low canopy areas that need trees. So, why are we all doing this? I'm probably speaking to the choir here about why trees are important, but just as a refresher, we know that greening and trees are powerful tools for making our communities, our neighborhoods healthier and more resilient. So who would want to live on this barren, hot block, this urban heat island, when it could look more like that? We can cool that block down. So that's what we're trying to use trees to improve, make our communities healthier, make them look more like this in an ideal world. We know that trees are so critical. We consider them like necessary, essential infrastructure. We're still trying to convince others of that, but they are tied to our health, our environment, our economy. So you all know you want to live here on a tree-lined street, right? So we're trying to do more of that. We know that trees are really critical for conserving energy, saving money on our energy bills. Planting them in the proper place can help you really cut down on those savings. As much as 34% air conditioning savings, or winter heating, just placing them in the right spot. And what all of you are interested in, water quality, again, you're probably well aware of these benefits, trees helping filter water of pollutants, contaminants. We know our streams are so polluted and have gotten worse over the years, so we need more trees to help mitigate that. And trees are capturing a lot of the rainfall, so they can definitely help cut down on all that stormwater and erosion that's happening. They are like umbrellas. They slow that rain down. And the air quality, we all deserve the right to breathe clean air. So trees have been proven to be air quality purifiers, and even have the ability to reduce asthma rates. And our overall public health, again, we see asthma, but trees can help reduce mental fatigue, help people focus better when they have more exposure to green. And they reduce stress. And, I'm sure we all felt it over this past year and a half, like just felt good to be outside in areas and green spaces to help us deal with the stress we've been facing. And then so many more social benefits. Studies show that trees can actually play an impact in reducing some forms of crime. And they bring community together when we do it as community tree planting and care. But we do have a problem in this region, in that we have lost millions of trees. There was a study done and released in 2003 showing that we lost 5 million trees in a 15-year period. So back around the turn of the century. And I'm sure that trend is continuing. I haven't seen any recent data on that, but with storms and pests and continuous development, I'm sure that trend is continuing. So we need to address it if we want to have these great benefits that trees are providing, because we're losing those when we lose tree canopy. So that's where PHS Tree Tenders comes into play as one solution, one way to help bring more tree canopy to your own community, your own neighborhood, your own street. Tree Tenders has been around since 1993, founded by our dear colleague, Mindy Maslin, who's still part of our team, actively working on Tree Tenders, specifically in Philadelphia. And so the program has been designed to just give people the education and the resources to empower them to plant and care for trees in their own community. And we now have over 5,500 tree tenders just in the Southeast Pennsylvania region alone. And this tree tenders program has been adopted statewide and even other places throughout the country. So many more tree tenders out there. And as you can see, here's a map showing tree tenders we have in our region. We probably are working with at least 75, 80 groups every year in planting alone. But all over the region, and we do have some gaps. So, and some of these groups may not be quite active. We're working on updating this map, but it is available on the Tree Tenders website. If you want to check it out, you can find contact info for all the group leaders. And so Tree Tenders, we host these biannual tree planting and tree offers twice a year, every April and November. Tree tender groups organize to plant trees within their own community as street trees, park trees, even front yard trees as well. And so in combination, I bet we're seeing over 1,000 volunteers participate in these plantings. And so we welcome you all to participate as well if you are not already. So what Tree Tenders is all about, this is a teaser. So we're going to talk a little bit about tree care. We're going to skim the surface, but in our actual Tree Tenders training, which is about 8 to 10 hour training that we do in a 4-part series starting September 22nd, mark your calendar. We teach about tree biology. We teach about what stresses trees out, how to identify trees, how to do some basic health assessment, looking at giving you a basic understanding of different stressors and different things that can affect the health of a tree, different symptoms and signs of that, and how you may go about diagnosing that. Or when it's time, you might need a tree professional to step in and help you solve the tree mystery. We definitely deep dive into how to properly maintain trees, including pruning, which I know everyone gets excited about. So Barley will be giving a little 101 on that very shortly. And then also how to plant the right tree in the right place and just how to organize a planting, what your different choices are for purchasing trees and the pros and cons of each, how to evaluate sites for whether they're appropriate for trees or what species. And we just provide a lot of technical support and assistance to groups who want to get involved with our plantings. So these are some of the tree stock choices that you typically find for planting. Bald and burlap, those big heavy trees. We shy away from those for many reasons, but they're really hard to move and they're much more expensive to purchase. And so we focus on bare root trees. And then, but container trees, something you might all be more familiar with, participating in watershed plantings or maybe even planting trees in your own yard. You might more likely to use a container tree. So there are the advantages and disadvantages to the containers. It's great that you can pretty much plant them at any time. You have a wider window and you usually have all 100% of the roots with that tree. But because those trees are grown typically in plastic pots, you often see all of those girdling, circling roots, which can be really problematic for the long-term health and vitality of that tree. And also sometimes the root flare, the part of the tree where the trunk turns into the root system, is buried in those containers. and also in balled and burlap stock. So that can actually really be detrimental to the tree's health if the root flare gets buried when the tree is planted. So here are some hidden problems that you might find in either container trees or balled and burlap stock. Again, the circling roots. A lot of container trees at the nursery, they're grown in various size pots. You know, they might start out in a very small pot. And if they're not moved up to the next pot size in a timely manner, you might get an internal layer of circling roots, and you might get multiple layers of circling roots. And again, that can eventually strangle and kill your tree over time. So that's one of the problems, typical problem of container trees. And again, balled and burlap trees, we often see the soil covering the root system. I don't know, it could be sometimes 6 inches, even 12 inches, depending. And that's not good either. And then you can get funky looking root systems in that, often in the balled and burlap, but even the containers. So that's why we really like using bare root trees. We are able to, through the Tree Tenders program, bulk order these trees from Schichtel's nursery in upstate New York near Buffalo. And again, we're ordering 800 to 1,000 trees every season, so we get a very good discount on them. So they're much less expensive to plant because, for one, they're easier to ship. They're very light. You can hold one, carry one in one hand. So they're very easy to work with, easy for volunteers to plant. We see that you can get 200%, up to 200% more roots at the time of harvest than you would with a tree that's harvested as one of the big balled and burlap trees. And that is really significant when it comes to having that tree get established and survive after transplant. And you just can see the root system. As I said, the root system is buried in the container in balled and burlap. So it's harder to mitigate that at time of planting. We do see really excellent survival with these bare root trees as well. So I'm focusing on tree care. So just some quick tips on planting, if for those of you who might have the opportunity to plant in your yards or with your community. I know these aren't all of the key tips, but these are the ones I want to just point out to you tonight. So again, you might be planting container trees. And again, as you're talking about manipulating the roots, because you might have those hidden circling roots, you definitely want to get into that ball and massage those roots out and kind of even investigate to make sure there isn't any hidden circling roots and address them. Sometimes we really get rough with those root balls and even cut them like a pie or shave off the ends, whatever we have to do to give that tree a good head start. It's kind of the tough love approach, but we do it now and really water that tree well at time of planting, then the tree should be all right. Then when it comes to just digging the hole, oftentimes people think they need to dig a hole that is 2 feet deep for some reason. And that would be digging a coffin for your tree if you did that. You only need to dig the tree as deep as the root system. So you first need to identify where your tree's root flare is. So let's see if I can use my spotlight tool and kind of point out. Can everyone see this? I'm looking at the bottom middle picture. You want to find that place on the tree where the trunk turns into the root system, where you have the first major woody roots. And you want that junction to be just above the soil grade. Often this gets buried. And again, that can lead to the decline of the tree over years. So you want to better to plant it too high than too deep. So you want your planting hole to be nice and wide to allow the tree's roots to easily grow into the surrounding soil, but you don't want the hole too deep because you don't want the hole to sink, or the tree to sink and the root flare to be buried. And then water, 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 critical to getting newly planted trees established, especially in the first few months after planting, but definitely in the first 2 years, it can take that long for a tree to kind of regrow the roots that it lost back at the nursery, to where it can kind of fend for itself from that point on. Okay, so as I said, with all that knowledge that we're teaching about tree planting, our groups, organize. All it takes is 3 people to form an official tree tenders group, which makes you eligible to apply to PHS to get these bare root tree offers for your community. And they can be planted in parks, public spaces, streets, or even in front yards. So we are about to release our application for our November planting, which it should be coming out next week. You can contact me to get on my mailing list so you can be notified about that. And I can put my email in the chat box, or we can share that after this. And it's only, the current rate for this season, it's only $55 a tree. So that is one amazing deal. So you should think about it. And I won't spend much time on this, but again, as I mentioned, TreeVitalize Watersheds is a grant program that we make available to municipalities, nonprofit groups like DCVA and other groups who want to organize watershed riparian plantings. And I'm sure Aurora can fill you in, or you can reach out to us if you're interested in doing that. So let's jump into tree care, for what you all are really here for. Well, this is just going to be a teaser because we cover this, in a few hours. There's a lot of content, so we're going to scratch the surface of basic tree care, and we really encourage you to sign up for our Tree Tenders class. We bring in awesome experts from Penn State Extension and Bartlett Tree experts to really give you some great resources and knowledge on this. And a lot of these slides come from that presentation. So just to set the foundation for tree care, we know that trees are systems that both require energy to live and function and carry out their biological processes, but they also are essentially creating energy for themselves to do that. They make their own food, which is pretty incredible, using the sunlight and going through the photosynthesis process. So that is very cool. So they need that energy to drive how they defend themselves from wounds or pest disease, how they just reproduce, how they, grow flowers and seeds, how they grow their leaves, how they do all of that, how they produce wood and maintain that. So it's critical to understand get the gist of what trees actually need to function and perform those processes so that they thrive in our environment. And again, the basics, air. So they need both oxygen, which mostly they're capturing through their root systems. And the CO2 for the photosynthesis process. But water and nutrients, space, light, it's almost what humans need. So they're like us in a way. So this poor tree in the bottom right here, oh boy, it doesn't have the space or access probably to a lot of these resources. So I would assume it's going to be a tree struggling if we could see the top of it. And understanding this kind of sets the foundation for how you think about trees when you see them in the landscape, and begin to address what's might be ailing them or what they need to really have vigor and look good and be healthy. And we can start by reducing long-term tree care costs, you know, by just thinking and planning at the beginning, when we have the opportunity to plant the right trees in the right place, trees that are appropriate for the location we want to put them, selecting good quality tree material to place in those locations, and then just starting with that basic young tree care, we will really set our trees up for good health if we can start here at the beginning of the tree's life. And if we don't start here, that's when we tend to see, we all know those trees that have a bad reputation in our communities, trees that are heaving sidewalks, or they're just struggling to survive, especially in our most urbanized areas. Streets can be a very tough environment. And that becomes expensive when you have more tree care costs, it really becomes expensive. So if we can mitigate those just at the onset of our work. So one way as tree tenders and just tree enthusiasts, tree lovers, it's good to just have a basic understanding that the root system is key, and the health of the root system is key to the tree's survival and its overall vigor, because a lot of what the tree needs, nutrients and water, oxygen, that's through the interface with the soil and the roots. And so if we can improve that area, we will do a lot for the tree's overall health. So, and these are some of the things to think about to improve root care and the root system: mulching, weeding. We'll talk a little bit about what a root collar excavation is, but again, that's meaning if our root flare is buried, like it might be in this photo actually. I think we might want to see a little bit more of a flare. How we can address trees that are planted too deeply. And even soil chemistry, what is that soil alkaline? Is it acid, acidic? That plays a huge role in the tree's overall health. And then again, irrigation, water, trees' access to water is huge. So we can start by doing some cultivation of the soil, just with our basic hand trowel or cultivator. We can loosen up the top couple inches of soil to kind of add some oxygen to that soil, giving that to the root system. And we can get rid of any competition from other plants that the tree has to deal with, especially grass and weeds. They will take the water and the oxygen and the nutrients away from the tree's root system. And this is especially critical in street tree environments where they already have a limited growing space. Definitely get those weeds out. And so again, finding that root flare, just here's what a mature tree root flare system looks like. These are the buttress roots. And in this one, the root flare was actually buried. You can see the delineation. And they went in and pulled away all the soil covering these buttress roots. And this is important because the cell tissue in the root flare is more like bark. And so you need to keep it exposed and dry for the most part. Otherwise, that tissue can actually rot and decay over time. And you might also get adventitious or girdling roots to start forming when that root system is buried too much. So if you see trees that look like telephone poles in the ground, this is a place to start pulling away that excess soil on the top of the root system. So here, kind of give you a sense, the top of those roots should just be exposed a little bit. You should be able to see those. So they can definitely look like a telephone pole, like this one on the left. And here you can actually see a girdling root that has formed here. And this root will continue to grow over time and definitely strangle the tree on this side and cause it to decline over time. And here's a big one that has gotten massive on the right side of this, the right photo. So these can even be addressed. And we teach more about that in our tree tenders class. Mulch is a tree's best friend. So this is something any tree needs and will help it overall. Putting mulch down will then, hopefully prevent grass and weeds from growing directly around the tree. And that will then hopefully keep the lawnmowers and weed whackers away from damaging the tree's trunk. That is typical. We often see that in parks where trees don't have mulch, but even in people's yards, where if you just have grass growing up to your trunk, I'm sure your trees might be nicked, and that could definitely kill a tree over time. It keeps happening. And trees just also help retain moisture in the soil, and they keep the soil cooler in the summer. And using that organic mulch material, that material breaks down. And so it's essentially a slow release of nutrients to the soil. So it improves soil quality as well. And we see that tree roots, you will have a much more significant density of tree roots under a bed of mulch than under turf grass, as you see here. So really great to do for every tree. And ideally, if you did it out to the tree's drip line, that would be ideal. We could do that for every tree. And here the photo is showing you example of lawnmower disease, where those weed whackers, lawnmowers continually hit the bark, and they are damaging the living tissue of the tree. So I won't get into all the technical terms about that, but essentially you're breaking the highways that allow water and nutrients to flow up and down the tree when we wound the trunk like that. So our basic rules of mulch that we teach, 3-3-3 rule, about 3 inches thick. You don't want mulch volcano like we see in the bottom photo here. That again breaks down into the soil and essentially is burying your tree's root flare and its root system. And that will cause all sorts of girdling, circling roots in that mulch pile after a period of time. And again, that tissue, the bark tissue, can rot with all that moisture around the trunk. So you do want at least a 3-foot radius of mulch if you have room, but wider the better. And keep that mulch away from the actual trunk of the tree. So this is more like what we want to see, a nice mulch donut or a mulch bagel, whatever you want to call it. And where you have groupings of trees, this is a great practice to do to actually make connected mulch beds. This will encourage even more root growth and expansion. And again, tree roots compete with grass, so the less grass, the better. And it'll make it easier to mow around this too, right? Having one big planting bed. So water is essential, really essential for young, newly planted trees in the first 2 years in the ground, but especially that first growing season. 15 to 20 gallons is approximate amount we recommend for trees. If you're planting smaller, very small container trees, it probably doesn't need quite that much, but you want a slow, deep watering. So you can't just dump 15 gallons onto the tree all at once, because the soil will never be able to absorb that, capture that, and the roots can't take that all up at once. So we do recommend using just like a 5-gallon bucket with a couple holes at the bottom, and fill that up and let that slowly release. Ideally, like over hours is best, but or putting a hose on a light trickle is good too. So I'm going to turn it over to Barley now to get into pruning.
Right. And we're going to whip through pruning really quickly. Because pruning is some art, because you are looking at the way the tree looks, but it's really based on science. And the pruning standards were actually revised not too long ago, and that's for professional arborists to use. The I guess it was the they call it ANSI A300. That's the standards that are used, the American National Standards Institute. And these are the objectives that you should use to prune. So you're not just pruning for the heck of it, you are pruning to accomplish certain objectives. So one of them, of course, is really important, is mitigating risk. So taking dead wood is really important so that you can protect people and property. So managing the health of the tree is, I would say, the number 2 reason that you would do pruning. Improving the structure, providing clearance for trucks or other vehicles or people to walk underneath, but also clearance so that you can see stop signs and so forth. Managing the size or the shape. And really that goes back to the principle that Dana brought up, which is that you should be planting the right tree in the right spot. You shouldn't really need to manage the size of your tree in the long run, because if you need to really significantly reduce the size of a tree, you've planted too big of a tree, too big of a maturing tree. So approving aesthetics, whatever, what you want it to look like, production, and wildlife habitat. So those are the basic reasons why you should be looking at pruning. And to me, the most important one, I think, is managing the health. It's really important that you manage that from the get-go, from the day that you plant that tree until the end of its life. So Dana, you're in charge of, yeah, thank you. So the 3 Ds is what we say you can prune anytime, and those are basically dead, damaged, or diseased branches. Those are branches that are not benefiting the tree in any way, and could actually be a liability for you and or for the tree. So they can be pruned. Those types of tree branches can be pruned at any time of the year, because basically they're already dead or already a problem. So, okay. So here are basic pruning tools. The essence of it is that you want to use something that is bypass. And by bypass, that means that they act like scissors. The 2 blades actually cross each other, making the cut, as opposed to crushing. And so that and a saw, depending on the size of your branch, you choose either pruners, loppers, or a saw. Okay. So it's very important that you are safe when you are pruning your tree. Actually, a professional arborist is working in a field that actually has the highest accident rate, because there are many ways that you can harm yourself or hurt yourself when you are pruning. For example, using a chainsaw above your head and all of a sudden the branch is coming down on your head. I mean, a lot of it is very much common sense, but some of it is not. You may not realize that you shouldn't be pruning a tree that is within 10 feet, any branch within 10 feet of a utility line, because that can arc over and cause the tree to become electrically charged, and therefore can electrocute you. And there's a lot of different things that you need to think about, but that's the point. You need to think before you get in that tree. Okay, so enough about that. If you are not able to easily prune your tree from the ground with your feet on the ground, then it's a good idea to find a certified arborist to help you with that. And this is the way to do it. You can go to www.treesaregood.com, which is the International Society of Arboriculture website. You input your zip code and it tells you the names and contact information for all of the certified arborists that work in your area. So that's how you find them. Okay. So this is where the science comes in. Branches are attached very intricately to the trunk of a tree. They are sort of interlaced layers of wood that help the branch to be very strongly attached. And the area where it is attached is called a branch collar. A lot of times it's a swollen area that you can just kind of barely see it if the arrow is pointing to it there, but some trees you can really see it very clearly. For example, the upper right-hand one, there's a great example of a branch collar. Now, what's important about the branch collar is because it is something called the branch protection zone. It has chemicals in there that, first of all, if you cut beyond it, outside of it, then the chemicals will help to prevent diseases and insects from entering the tree and causing disease. And the other thing that those chemicals do are they help the tree to create what is called wound wood or callus wood that closes over the wound. So that's one of the reasons why you really want to make sure that you are pruning your tree when it is young, because you want to make your pruning cut the smallest it could possibly be so that the tree needs to use as little energy as it possibly can in order to close over that wound. So I think next slide will show you some cuts. Yep, here's where you would cut. The red line is where you would cut. Nowhere nearer the trunk than that. Your final cut should always be outside of that branch collar. Okay, so this is what we mean by wound closure. It's callus wood that seals. You can see that if it's done properly, if the cut is proper, it forms this donut of callus wood around the wound, and gradually it'll close it completely over. And that's where a knot comes from when you are looking at lumber. Those are branch entry places where branches entered. So you want it to look like that. And you do not want to spray any kind of oil-based anything on that wound, because what that does is sort of closes moisture in and it invites infection and disease to come in. I think we've got a couple more. Okay, the one on the left is a good cut. The one on the right was almost a good cut, but at the top it nicked into that branch collar and the tree had a hard time completing the callus wood around there. So that's what you look for, is that donut, the complete donut. And you also don't want a large stub on the branch, because that means that the tree has to give extra energy to bring outside of that whole stub to close the wound. So you don't want that either. It's kind of, it takes a little while to get used to, and that's where maybe some of the art comes in. So these are flush cuts. The one on the left is a rip, actually, that came from not properly cutting. Above that, you'll see that there's a stub cut, which is also not a good thing. What happens if you don't prune properly is that a lot of times you'll get little suckers that come out, and that's the trees saying, oh my gosh, I've been wounded badly and I'm not happy. I'm trying to send out something to help me get better, and it's not better. It's just not better. So it's very important to learn how to properly prune. Okay, next. For larger branches, you will want to use the 3-cut method, and we do go over this extensively in the Tree Tenders class. And when we are able to do in-person Tree Tenders demonstrations, we show you how to do this. And maybe this is something that would be done at the CREC in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if that's what your objective is.
Yeah, I think we'd like to demonstrate this. So
yeah,
come on to the CREC next Tuesday and see how it's done in person.
Right, right. So the 3-point cut method is basically to prevent what is shown on the left of this picture, where the bark has actually ripped the length of that cut and is going to be next ripping right down the trunk in an area that it is impossible for the tree to clean up and prevent disease and to close over. So you want the first to be an undercut to prevent that from happening. And then the second is you take the weight of that limb off completely, and it will rip down to that first undercut, but that's as far as the rip will go. And then you just have the third cut that doesn't have the weight of that big heavy branch to pull the bark off of the tree. So that's a 3-cut method. And for bigger trees, here's an example of what it looks like. And you can see that next to the number 1 there, that the number 2 cut did rip back to the number 1 cut, but it didn't go any further. And so number 3 is going to be right there on the outside of the branch collar. These are just fundamental things that are part of pruning expertise, and it takes a little bit of practice, but it's really important for the health of the tree. Okay, what you got next? Let's see. It's hard not being the person in charge of turning the slides over. So, if anybody comes to your tree saying that they're a tree person, a tree care person, and says, we'd like to top your tree so that it's smaller, send them running as fast as you can, because it is not appropriate. It is actually forbidden by the new standards. It's called topping because each of those cuts is basically a long stub cut that the tree cannot heal over or stub or callus over. So there should be no reason why you would do that. It's an unacceptable practice, and you still see it even though an arborist knows better. And that's my point about arborists, is that if you find somebody that has a truck that says I can cut trees down, that isn't necessarily an arborist. You need to ask for their qualifications and for their insurance information. So you're looking for good structure. If you establish good structure in the first year or 2 after you transplant a tree, actually the best time is after a year of growth. If you do it when they're young, then you can avoid major expensive problems when the tree is fully mature and you've got large cuts, expensive cuts. Your goal is to have a central leader, which the one on the left shows that there is a central leader leading straight up from the trunk. That's ideal, with smaller branches coming out on the side. What you don't want are a number of larger branches all coming from one point. Those are called codominant stems, and each one of them is trying to be the leader, but you end up with a large number or even just 2 large heavy branches coming from one point. That is a weak spot in your tree. So you want to try to get rid of that early on in the tree's life. Okay, you want strong branch unions. And we'll show you, I think the next is showing you the included bark. There's an example of a great, beautifully pruned tree. It's the way that it should look. That is the other thing to say too about the standards. They're called natural standards now because what you're trying to do is to retain the natural form of the tree. That's the way that particular species of tree was supposed to grow. You need to know what your species is and understand the way it is supposed to look when it is growing in the forest. A lot of what we do is trying to replicate what happens in forests. Okay, so next. All right, and this is showing a good union versus not a good union. And we call them crotches, believe it or not, but a V-shaped crotch is generally speaking not a strong union. You'll see included bark where there is bark on the inside of where those trees are together, and that is a very weak spot. It's a very weak spot. Whereas the U shape, which is on the right, that's a stronger union. So if you're going to have 2 branches that are fairly large, it's better to have U than V. Okay, so the next is showing the included bark. And you can see that this tree on the left had included bark almost all the way down. What happens is that the bark on each side rubs against each other in a wind, and the two branches are going against each other. It's a matter of physics, and they're just going to split. There's just no way about it. So you want to correct that early in the life. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a problem like this. And no one wants to see this. No one wants to see this. So, okay, that's enough said about that. Okay, so the natural pruning system, which is the most recent ANSI 300 standards. First of all, you want to take all the dead, diseased, and decayed and damaged branches off, because that mitigates risk. So those are the 3 Ds. It's easy to remember. Next, you would want to take off any rubbing or crossing branches, because what ends up happening is that the branches start to break into the bark. They'll rub the bark off of each of those branches and open the tree up for disease, and it's a wound. Then you want to take those tight V branch unions with included bark. And you really, really want to do that early on if you possibly can. Then the 4th level of pruning is getting rid of some selected water sprouts. You don't necessarily need to get all of the water sprouts. And a water sprout is something that is happening in the branches, the upper branches of a tree. They go straight upright and they come from those branches, as opposed to the root suckers that come from the base of the tree, which you see a lot of times if there's been damage down there because of weed whacking or lawnmower damage, or if the tree is stressed out, sometimes you'll get these root suckers, and those you do want to get rid of before they become too big. They are not good branches. They're just, I call them snorkels. That's the tree trying to get more leaf cover, and they're just not good for the tree. So those are the 5 levels of what you want to take from the tree. So they're saying here the majority of cuts should be from the outer portion of the crown. So if you look at the one on the left, a lot of the branching has been taken off of the inner part of that tree. And so you can see right through the middle of that tree. That's something called lion's tailing. And that is not a good physics example, because the tree in the wind is more liable to break. It's much better, if you're going to reduce the tree at all, to take the branching from the outside, and certainly not topping. But the tree on the right is much better pruning job, much better pruning job. It needs those inner branchings. So the standard basically says that you should take the smallest diameter cut that you could possibly take. And we've talked about that already. It's easier for the tree to close it over with less energy, because as Dana said, the tree provides its own energy, but it is a limited amount of energy. And so you want to try to prevent the tree from expending its energy on something that it doesn't have to expend the energy on. So no heartwood should ever be exposed during your cuts. So you have to really think about where you're pruning. This tree, you can see, had a very large pruning cut. It's huge, and the tree really wasn't able to close over it adequately before it became diseased inside, and now that's probably a hollow tree in there. So it would have been better to prune that tree probably 25 years ago when it was first planted. Okay. So
You want to say it's 7 o'clock, so
okay.
We're happy to stay on, but we want to respect people's time that they need to jump off. We're pretty much, we're getting almost done, just maybe a few more minutes on the presentation. We're here, we can answer any more questions. Yep. But we'll maybe just kind of peruse through the last pruning ones, I think.
Yep, that sounds good. Real quick.
Come to the tree tenders class.
Right. Okay,
we can talk about this more.
Right, definitely in detail. You should prune when the tree is dormant if you possibly can. Absolutely never when the trees are just pushing their leaves, or when they're dropping them in the fall. Deadwood anytime. Flowering trees just after they flower. Okay. I think we can
over
promise that's
this technical
there
stuff.
are some technical things, and we will
Yeah.
go through that when we have more time during the tree tenders class. But there are different kinds of cuts, and just to summarize, there are right and wrong ways to do it, and we are hoping that you will learn the right ways. Okay, that's probably fine for that. And reduction cuts, yeah, just basically you can hurt your tree pretty badly if you don't do it right. So I need to think about it. Okay, final thoughts. Do you want me to do this, Dana, or do you get it?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so here are the takeaways. These are the nuggets. I always call it nuggets, but mulching correctly, as Dana has described. Don't over prune, because you don't want to take away what we call the lunch money for the tree. If you take away too many leaves at one time, it leaves the tree without the ability to gain energy. You want to protect the roots. Probably the most important part of the tree is the root zone. So don't compact the soils so that the tree can't breathe through its roots. Don't change the grade. You don't want to bury the roots, because that would be just like burying yourself, that you can't breathe. You need to have air coming down through the soil so that the roots can breathe. You want to make sure that you give enough water to the young trees, especially during the first 2 growing seasons when they're trying to get enough roots to sustain themselves. And then making sure that if you do call a professional, that it is truly a professional. An ISA certified arborist has done extensive studying and passed an extensive exam, and has to do continuing education to stay up with the standards every year. So those are nuggets. And this is a great quote. So the bottom line is this: the quality of all of our lives depends on tree benefits, and the benefits depend on having healthy trees, and healthy trees require quality care, and quality care depends on investment and you and your ability to provide that tree with what it needs in order to live a full, healthy, complete, and fully beneficial life. That's you, we hope. So with proper planting and care, which these guys are doing, you can turn this kind of a scenario into this kind of a scenario. And truthfully, I would much prefer the latter myself. Think of this lovely shade and beautiful view. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And as I said, go to the PHS website, or you can also, you put in treetenders.org, it'll take you directly to the Tree Tenders webpage, and what you can register for our fall Tree Tenders basic training, which is 4 Wednesday nights, and then we'll do an in-person training workshop in October. So we hope to connect with you all and see you in a class, and hopefully I can work with some of you on planting in your own neighborhoods or communities.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to get.
One thing I would say is that, first of all, your organization can become a tree tenders group itself. And there are some organizations like the CRC Watershed Association has a group, and those people don't all live in the same community, but they do work together for the benefit of the CRC watershed. But failing that, if you would like to, you can also join a group in your own neighborhood, if there is one, going back to that map that's on the PHS website. And there are a lot of Delaware County tree tenders groups, so we can guide you to one and get you in touch with the leader if in fact you would like to get involved. So,
Wonderful. Thank you, Barley, and thank you, Dana. That was really, really informative, and we appreciate your time coming and sharing that with us tonight. And I really hope that some of you will consider joining us next Tuesday night for the part 2 of this program, which is the in-person demonstration at the Haverford Reserve. I'll send out a link with the sign up for that, and also the recording for this if you just want to, go back and check something that you heard and you want to be reminded. So Okay, so that's it, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for having us.
Thank you.